The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another edition of It's Just Business, the sports, business, and media show of the Hogsty Network. My name is Chris Larry. I'm joined by Steve and Rich, and we're going to get into it with a bunch of sports and business-related stories. How you doing tonight, gentlemen?
Good. How you doing?
I'm still recovering from the Saturday night debacle, Redskins-Packers personally, so I'm having to refocus on some nice, non-threatening business stories.
Yes, I keep trying to convince myself that it's just preseason, but I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe this time.
The banana in the tailpipe. Got a Beverly Hills Cop reference there. I like that. No, yeah, it's been pretty awful in that regard. That's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother show, but yeah, it's a tad depressing.
Well, let's see what happens with the live bullets. All right, so we're going to jump in. We actually have an all NFL-based show today as we talk about sports, business, and media. And we're actually going to start off with something in our last show I kind of teased as a story that we'll probably be following through all of the NFL season, and that is the issue of ratings. There was a lot of debate and some kind of mixed data last year. Ratings were down, ratings were back up. Are we talking about outside factors? This is a long-term problem for the NFL. So there was enough sort of grist for the debate last year, and there was no trends, right? These are just blips on the data radar. But this year we can start to track and see if trends emerge. And so we got our first real ratings data back from the Hall of Fame game a couple weeks ago. And kind of continuing with this narrative is a little bit of a mixed bag on what we got. Steve, why don't you give us a little bit of the rundown of the numbers?
Okay, well, yeah, obviously the question before, that Chris posed at the end of the last show was whether the ratings blip is permanent or as a result of some extraneous factors like, the election and some other things. And so what we have here, the article is from Sports Media Watch, dated August 4th, 2017 by Paulson. Anyway, and so it's kind of a mixed bag, like you said. So we were curious about this, and so the NFL's first game of the season was the Hall of Fame game, which was Dallas Cowboys, Arizona Cardinals. And so we did a little digging to try and find the ratings. And the ratings, the raw numbers aren't going to mean a whole lot to the audience here, but just for the record, it got a 5 rating nationally, which is 8.2 million viewers on NBC Thursday. Now, there's a plus and a minus to this. For the NFL, the minus is that 5 rating is down 24% just from a year ago, and it was the least watched Hall of Fame game since the Saints and Cardinals in 2012. So on the surface, that makes you think, gosh, maybe there's something to this rating stuff that Chris mentioned before, and that the NFL was concerned about, but. This also was the highest rated sporting event of the year since the NBA Finals. So think about that. A Thursday night Hall of Fame game, which, by the way, these games are never on Thursday. They've always been on Sunday before, not Thursday. And so a Thursday night game, preseason game, in which the starters didn't even play, beat every sporting event in the country back to the NBA Finals. So, including the NBA, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. So, what do we think? What do we see in this data?
I think one of the things that strikes me is that we're in the middle of the sports drought. There's no NBA. You're still not quite in the thick of the in Major League Baseball playoffs, and you hear a lot of talk about football around this time because everybody thinks their team has a shot. We're coming off the draft. We're coming off of free agency. And also you're looking at the Thursday night and what else is there to watch. So maybe there are a lot of shows that are not, the fall lineups are not on. But, it just tells me that while ratings are a concern, football is still king.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just can't. It's stunning to me, though, that even though the NFL is king, there isn't a Sunday night baseball, Yankees, Red Sox game, Dodgers, Giants, Cardinals, Cubs, anything like that. And this includes the National Hockey League playoff or finals. It's amazing to me that the Hall of Fame game tanked, relatively speaking, and it still beat everything else.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of the glass half empty view here. There's a couple things I think I'd want to point out. One, this was the Cowboys, and as much as it makes me sort of choke back the puke in the back of my mouth, they are, a ratings hog for the NFL. So it is a little bit, let's say one thing right at the top. It's very difficult to take too much away from a Thursday night Hall of Fame game, and what was that? Late July, early August, right?
Early August.
So it's tough to take too much other than just a little bit of data. But, the Cowboys are a big draw, so to sort of have a dip after, and it actually didn't have the game last year, right? I think it was a weather, rain out or lightning out or whatever. So if you're going back 2, 3, 4 years, and the Cowboys draw the worst since 2012. So that's a little bit of a sign to me. And two, anytime that we're talking about the NFL compared to the other sporting leagues and bragging that they're still beating them, but by smaller margins, the narrative is going the wrong way for the NFL because these things weren't even a question before. Like, these things would just blow the other sports out of the water. Now we're actually starting to look at the margin of how much they're beating them and seeing where the trend is going. So I think, would I be freaking out if I was in the NFL offices? No, not any more than I was 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 8 months ago. But I do think it's another little drip in the probably downward spiral of NFL ratings. And it also shows me, and they say a little bit in the article, that they're starting to be able to pick up, the sort of all-encompassing ratings, viewing, streaming, etc. This is not an NFL's problem, but just the way we monitor who's watching and listening stuff, we still haven't figured out how to get the composite number yet.
Well, it needs to be redefined. It's like counting album sales in music.
Right.
You can't count that now. I think you're downplaying the effect of a Thursday night game because it's really not an apples-to-apples comparison when every other Hall of Fame game has been on a Sunday afternoon, that draws a much, much bigger audience rather than a Thursday night during the week, party night. I think that has a clear effect on it. But nonetheless, I think you're right to bring up the Cowboys, and we hate the Cowboys on this show, at least on the Hog side we do. But the fact of the matter is, but the fact of the matter is that the Dallas Cowboys are the number one draw, maybe even bigger than the Patriots ratings wise. Certainly, it's Cowboys and the Patriots are neck and neck, and to have a dip like that for Dallas, yes, it's a Thursday. Like you said, I think the fair way to show it, in my view, is the NFL probably wasn't thrilled, but they're not in panic mode over this because it was a Thursday.
It's all about money. Is the NFL still making money? Is their bottom line? Is their bottom line still moving? I think it's concerning, and we had the conversation before, guys, about whether the ratings fell because of the Kaepernick situation or it was election season. But if I'm not mistaken, the ratings seem to rebound towards the end of the season. But again, we don't know. Vacation season. I tend to think one thing, I've mentioned it before. I tend to think that if people are going to choose summer outdoor fun stuff in a Hall of Fame game, they're going to choose the summer fun outdoor stuff. Outside of the hardcore fans like us.
That may be true. I like to ask you guys: have either one of you watched an NFL game on a streaming service on a mobile device?
No,
yes.
Never. Yeah. See, I haven't either. Now, Chris, you do that. Do you do it on a regular basis?
I would prefer. I'm an out of market fan, so and I don't. I live in a city. I can't just slap a dish on my apartment. So, when I get DirecTV through my computer, I would prefer to watch it on my computer, or I computer throw it over to my TV screen. But if I'm in a pinch, yes, I'll watch it on my phone.
Okay. I've never done that, and I'm not a market guy too, but I'm an anachronism when it comes to, when it comes to the streaming TV and stuff. So I'm probably not the best judge of it. I think I do think you brought up an interesting point earlier, Chris, in that I think that this probably applies to television in general, not just sports. But they really have to redefine how to rate these programs, and you see you're starting to you see in regular network shows you'll get a rating for live views, meaning people haven't DVR'd it versus people who have DVR'd it, and I think we're gonna have to get in the realm of sporting events, we're gonna have to get to the point where they have to give a number for the streaming services and then a number for the network broadcast. And I think that's really probably the only fair way to do it. I don't know how you could judge that technically, but they're going to have to get to that point, I think.
Let's also point out, and Steve, you brought up a good point about the Thursday night. This is also another example of the NFL just being stupid and going for big bang over what makes sense. No one wants to watch the first football game of the year, which is a garbage football game, on Thursday night. Hey, if I'm on the couch on a Sunday and I'm looking to chill, yeah, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to be curious. Not on Thursday night. I don't need the pomp and circumstance, and it's in freaking Canton, Ohio. It's basically a high school football stadium, You want it on a lazy Sunday. You want to have watched the Hall of Fame induction ceremony the night before. No one's looking for Thursday night, NBC, big for the opening game. Put it on Sunday, keep it low-key, let it be an on-ramp into the season, and I bet you the ratings would come back.
Well, yeah, that and this article actually breaks it down by demographic here a little bit, by age demographic, and points out that the overall rating was down 24% from last year, but the 18 to 49 demographic was down 31%, and then the 18 to 34 demographic was down 37%. And I think especially that younger group, I think that's directly tied to the fact that it's Thursday night. Directly tied to that.
Again, what would you rather do on a Thursday night in August? Would you rather watch the game, or would you rather be out in the park, or listen to music, or at some festival? Or I just think that
your recreation of choice.
It's if you're a hardcore, I'm embarrassed to tell my friend. I watch a preseason game from like snap to snap, and
you're embarrassed to tell your friends that you're such a fan.
So, yes, but I just think that it's if people had a choice, they probably wouldn't choose to, as Chris said, they wouldn't choose to watch football on a Thursday night.
They also don't understand their core fans. When you're talking early August football, no one is looking for like a fake Thursday night football game. In fact, if they wanted to serve their core fans at that point, put on the scrimmages. Hardcore fans would much rather watch the designed scrimmage where you could actually see how they run the plays. The hardcore football fan would be much rather watch and get into the nerd part of football, watching early season practices, than they would some fake game, which is essentially what a Thursday night game on August 3rd is.
Well, and in particular, the Hall of Fame game, because it's a fifth preseason game for these two teams, and so they usually don't play any of the starters at all in the Hall of Fame game.
I think the NFL, to that point, may need to look at how they market these games. For example, you're right. You're not going to see starters much. You're going to see a lot of vanilla. And even our team that we love doesn't seem to be able to get vanilla right, but that's another show.
That's another show.
I think what I am most interested in, and this is, again, a hardcore fan, I think the NFL should probably market the competition for guys making the team, the rookies, the draft picks. I'm more interested in that. I'm excited to see Fabian Moreau, and I'm excited to see Jonathan Allen and Ryan Anderson. So don't market me in the market. Show me like Jordan Reed or Cousins to Doxson. Those guys aren't going to play. I would much rather. Let's look at the young guns. Let's look at, can you sort of have a link between the draft, camp, and here's the chance for the rookies to prove themselves to make the team.
No casual fans are watching early August football. Like, so stop marketing
Right.
to them.
Yeah. Well, the NFL does a good job with their opening weekend game.
Yes,
Because they have they have the big Thursday night game, but they have the pregame show, and they'll bring a band in to play music, and they have a live Times Square shot. But they're also brilliant. They're just lucky, not brilliant, that the season starts in September. Because that's right in conjunction with the ratings sweep. It's right when a news television season starts. It's the peak of ratings. So they kind of got lucky in that regard. But to your point, Rich, I think the NFL has heard you on that, because the NFL Network does do stuff like that. They do training camp visits, and they do some follow the rookies type shows around. But I can't imagine casual fans are watching NFL Network.
Right. No.
I just can't imagine that. Hardcore fans do. Like, that's my default. Whenever nothing else is on, you can watch NFL Network. I can't believe your average fan is going to do that.
But geographically, I mean, just think about it in our minds, though. September, when kids are not in school, you're still not really thinking about football. Football means after Labor Day, it's a little cool out. Kids are back in school. Summer's over. Vacation's over. Oh, football's starting.
Unless you happen to work for a network that spent days and days and days at training camp and uploading audio and interviewing people. Well, I think let's summarize it like this, because the discussion started weeks ago when we talked about this. Does the NFL have a ratings problem? And so what do we? And I think, Chris, you're the best one to sum this up. What does the NFL take from this in conjunction with what happened last year?
I mean, I think they'll rationalize it away, and it's somewhat they should, because it's a small data point and a large data set. But at the same time, I think if you're looking at these small pieces, there's probably some folks in the NFL office that were already nervous, and this is not going to buoy them and their excitement, and it'll be a lot of pressure on those first 3 or 4 weeks of primetime games, where there'll be the media industry, sports industry, the NFL itself. They're especially if we see some of the social unrest continue, which I think is a bit of a scapegoat, but that's another story. But you'll start to see the story of the ratings will be being talked about, even if they're up. It will be a narrative by week 3.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you. Can't argue with you. It's kind of a wait and see thing. It was just our first look into this. I think we would be doing our show a disservice if we didn't follow this on an ongoing basis and see what happens.
There's people in the NFL office that are sitting there with every orifice crossed about getting a couple good competitive games in early prime time, because that's what they need.
How do you cross an orifice? I'm just curious.
Oh, Steve.
Maybe we shouldn't get into that. That might be another show that we don't want to do.
I'll send you some books.
Does anyone know what the opening game is on Thursday Night Football?
So you had to ask, and and embarrass me because I don't know. No, I don't know.
That's okay.
I don't know. So you're gonna make me look it up.
Well, that's will be a teaser as we follow the NFL rating story into the season. So there we go. So we'll move on. We have an all NFL show, so we probably can circle back to a couple of these issues. But rumors are flying fast and furious that the NFL is considering giving Roger Goodell a contract extension to 2024. Steve can fill in some of the gaps, but I believe his current contract runs currently through 2019. So it's not like he's at the end of a contract. He's about a little bit year and a little bit over away from that running out, but they're looking to extend it. So they must be happy with Goodell. Is this a smart move? Is this short-sighted, or is he just that good for the owners?
I think it's a smart move for the NFL. I know the fans don't like it, and if you saw the social media reaction to this news today, it was sort of incredulity with, when it's coming from the fans. But from an NFL perspective, look, he negotiated a CBA that was drastically in favor of the owners. They slapped the players all around in 2011 with the CBA, and they're making more money than they ever were. Franchise values have gone up. This TV ratings thing we'll have to see, but the big part of where this gets the NFL with this extension is that Roger Goodell becomes the point man for the negotiation of the next CBA. If you have, it's a pretty smart move by the owners, actually, because if you have his contract expire in 2019, you have to bring a new commissioner in, get him some credibility with the owners, and then a year later they start to work on the new CBA, because the CBA expires in 2021. And so I think we're keeping old Roger Dodger in large part because they have faith in his ability to negotiate the next collective bargaining agreement.
Well, this was actually quite a surprise to me that they would actually announce it now. I think the NFL, as much as people think that Roger Goodell is a stooge and a puppet, and he may be those things, but money is the bottom line. And he has made an incredible amount of money for the owners. And I'm just curious as to what the owners feel about the reputation of the brand of the NFL. And I don't know if Roger Goodell has been one who has led the NFL to a place where the NFL is looked at in a overall positive light. And I'm just curious as to where the owners are on this sort of moral thing with Roger Goodell. But I found this quite surprising.
Well, I have an article here that's from Street and Smith Sports Business Daily. This is published August 21st, called "Staying Put for a While, NFL Close to Extending Goodell's Contract." And they dealt with, the article is fairly short, but it goes into a little bit about what you're talking about, Rich, and makes the point to say that from the view of the owners, at least, Goodell has weathered a number of storms for the owners, and fairly well. They had the Patriots, the Patriots deflated ball scandal. The NFL came through that. They won in court over that. Patriots fans hate them, but at the end of the day, they won where it counted. They've had the concussion issue with CTE crisis. Well, you know what they did? They negotiated a settlement with a class action suit, for the former players on it. So we weathered that storm, and now they've got the domestic violence stuff going on, and they haven't really taken a huge hit for that either. Where they take a hit in the eye of the public, I think, with Goodell is his handling of player discipline. But that doesn't cost him any money. That's cost him some negativity in the views of fans, but it hasn't cost the owner the money. The big major danger signs for the owners is the CTE thing could have cost him billions. Billions and billions and billions of dollars could have endangered the game, and they kind of got through that. The collective bargaining agreement, you're talking about billions of dollars, and he steered a big chunk of it back to the owners. And so I think they're willing to take, some slings and arrows with the player discipline stuff, because ultimately it's not really about money. And frankly, part of Roger Goodell's purpose in life is to take the slings and arrows, for the owners on things like player discipline.
That's a fabulous point, Steve. I think probably, the sort of getting close to the next CBA and his success in the last one, being a very league/owner-centric CBA is probably a big one. So I get all of your reasoning why it's good for the NFL and good for owners, and I don't disagree with any of it. I think the sad fact that fans are left with is the fact that Roger is good for business, good for the league, good for the owners, and we're just not sure he's good for football overall. And that he probably makes as many short-term decisions as he does thinking long-term about the overall health of the game. And I don't know. I think he just has people nervous. He's also just not a very likable guy, right? So, and the NFL came from this, if you go Pete Rozelle, Paul Tagliabue, these were some of the most like revered, well-liked owners in all. I'm sorry, excuse me, commissioners in all of sports, and he just does not kind of carry on that tradition of likability. Not really his fault. Doesn't mean he's doing a good or bad job, but I think that's actually part of the public perception.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, the owners weren't happy with Paul Tagliabue when he left. Remember, because he may have been slightly more charismatic than Roger. No, Roger's not a charismatic guy, but they didn't like the collective bargaining agreement that he negotiated. A couple other points in this though. The article that I cited before seems to indicate that his salary is going to be about the same. But that the $30 million range, so he's certainly not underpaid. He's making about $30 million or so a year.
Well, he made $34 million in 2014, so I imagine he's going to get on the north side of 35 at least.
Well, the article suggests it's going to be in the same general ballpark. Put it that way. Who knows what the final number is going to be? But also, what's interesting is this is already voted on. Apparently the owners voted in the May owners meeting to delegate authority to negotiate this contract to the compensation committee. So this is not like a question. This is a done deal. So, Rich, what do you think?
I think that Roger Goodell will continue to make money for the owners. I think, and this will lead into our next point, I think that the owners overlook public perception of the NFL in lieu of money. And I think that the NFL will have, I think the NFL has had an image problem and will continue to have an image problem unless they do something, as you indicated earlier, Steve, with the discipline process. And I don't think the owners. I mean, just take the Ezekiel Elliott issue. I always thought that something was up, that it took too long. Dallas Cowboys were in the midst of a run where they went 13-3. And when this whole Ezekiel Elliott thing came out and they talk about investigation, who knows if that investigation was completely closed, or whether they were kind of holding off until the end of the season while they made their run. So I think the NFL is losing credibility with the fans, but the owners, not with the owners, because they're still making money. So who knows what the owners really, who knows what else they care about other than money?
It's a business for them. They don't care about anything else but money, and they care about the image of the NFL and the integrity of the game to the extent that it's going to affect the bottom line. These guys aren't football fans. Yes. I think Daniel Snyder is probably not alone, but he's one of a handful of very few that are true fans of the game. Mm-hmm. We've said this before on the Hogsty. Say what you will about Daniel Snyder, because he's made a lot of mistakes as an owner, but nobody can ever question that he loves the Washington Redskins. Yes. Now, can you really say that about, say, the owner of, who's the guy with the weird mustache up in Minnesota, mm-hmm. Khan?
Yeah, yeah. Or the owner of the Bengals, who's notoriously cheap.
Yeah, and maybe they are. We don't know those guys, but I find it hard to believe that those guys are real football fans. Mm-hmm. It's just a business to them.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
With this, I think it's frankly probably kind of a done deal.
I think something worth exploring on another show is how is it that what is the NFL not doing that the NBA is doing in terms of discipline. You don't hear these incidents in the NBA. You don't hear the labor unrest in the NBA like you do in the NFL. That's another show, but it's just something worth exploring.
Well, you don't hear about it in Major League Baseball either.
Right.
Major League Baseball recently renewed their collective bargaining agreement. They did it outside of the media. Mm-hmm. It wasn't in the press hardly at all. Yeah. The players and the owners sat down and quietly got it done and quietly extended basically the same deal they had. That having been said, of course, there's a lot more money to be made in Major League Baseball for players and in basketball too. Mm-hmm. These NFL players sort of inherently lack bargaining authority when it comes to the NFL because their careers are so much shorter and they don't have as much money. Right. So they can't weather the storms that some of these other players could weather, and it's a really tough thing to change for those of you who are out there rooting for, these negotiations to go more towards the players' side.
Yep.
Which I'm not. I'm really kind of neutral about it personally.
Yeah, and you just there's also kind of a economies of scale issue, so to speak. You're talking about the rosters that are 3 times larger in the NFL by design and necessity. All right, so we'll see. This is not an official announcement yet, so we'll probably dip back into this subject when King Roger is in for 2024 and see where we go from there. Also,
Oh, can I point out one real thing before
Sure.
you move on? I'd like to also point out that there have only been 3 commissioners in NFL history since the AFL NFL merger. Okay, we've had Pete Rozelle, Paul Tagliabue, and now Roger Goodell. The owners like stability. They are the Pittsburgh Steelers on a larger scale. They don't want change. They don't like change. They want to maintain the status quo as much as possible, and so that's a big part of this. They have no desire to replace Roger Dodger, after only relatively speaking, a handful of years. That's not what they want. They want him to continue on with his job until he feels like retiring.
which is fairly
Sorry, Chris.
for all. I mean, that's maybe with a possible exception of Major League Baseball throughout its history, although not recent. Stability in league commissionership is pretty much a given in most of the 4 big sports. It's pretty rare for those things to change over. Baseball went through a little stretch where they seemed to change commissioners like Sox, but that was an anomaly, not the rule.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
All right, we're going to move on to our third and probably final topic of tonight's It's Just Business. And we're going to stay in the realm of the NFL in our All NFL show this week. And we're going to talk a little bit about, is a player's boycott possible, probable, or would it be effective around the Kaepernick issue and maybe other social issues as it's seen as a legitimate form of protest? Rich, you recently wrote a column about this on the Hogsty website. Want to give us a little bit of your take on what you wrote there?
Sure. So there's been quite a bit of chatter in my social media circle. And I am in a circle with a lot of hardcore football fans, NFL fans, and many of them have sworn off of the NFL indefinitely for a number of reasons. And one of which is what is perceived to be a blatant effort and collusion by the NFL owners to lock Colin Kaepernick out of the league. And so people throw the word boycott out. And my premise is that boycott is just not something that you can just flick the remote control and turn the TV off and it be successful. One, it has to be something, when you think of boycott, you're thinking of some type of financial cause and effect where you have the lack of supporting this product or supporting this service will lead to loss in revenue or maybe possibly pressure from sponsors or public outrage that will lead to some type of change. I don't think, and with all due respect to my social media circle and friends, I don't know if that's the answer, because who are you boycotting and what's the purpose? Are you boycotting to get Colin Kaepernick a job? Are you boycotting issues related to excessive force that Colin Kaepernick has spoken out against? I just don't think it could be done. You can't holler boycott without a plan and without the players. You can't have a boycott and the players still play. Now, if the players decide that they're going to do a walkout, then I think that they, for lack of a better term, they have the NFL by the balls. But I don't think I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think then that would get the owner's attention.
Well, first of all, as to player walkout, understand out there that the collective bargaining agreement prohibits a strike. Okay? And so the players are not allowed to strike contractually through the term of this collective bargaining agreement. So if that were to happen, all the other social issues aside, if this came to pass, I think it's likely that the NFL could get a court order to break the strike and force them to play again, because that is a provision in the collective bargaining agreement. Okay, but let's address the boycott part first, because and I think we got to address the social issues behind it, but just specifically relative to a boycott, when it comes to the NFL, you know, the TV revenue is going to be there. There are TV contracts in place that make billions and millions of dollars, for the NFL, and radio contracts and everything else. And so a short term, fan walkout, for lack of a better term, is not going to do much to the owner's bottom line. Where if fans are interested in doing this, players aside, you have to irritate their advertisers. Because the advertisers are the source of the funds ultimately that the networks use to pay the NFL, and the success of the advertising is based on the viewers. And so a boycott has to target in my opinion, would have to target advertisers specifically in mass numbers. And so relative to the issues at hand and the issues that generated your column were the social and racial issues behind Colin Kaepernick's initial protest and the storm that was generated. And we've talked about this on the show before. I'm not a fan of Colin Kaepernick, and the way he protested. I'm not about that. I understand his issue. I do have, I have to question it. Colin's made a lot of money, right? He made a lot of money with 49ers. I have to question whether some players would follow him down that rabbit hole. Because you can call it collusion. I don't personally think anybody's colluding against Kaepernick, but call it whatever you want. He's played himself out of a job for whatever one reason or another. I don't know if a lot of players who aren't making Colin Kaepernick money are going to be willing to follow him down that path just out of the name of social justice, when they need to eat and they need to make a living and they need to support their families. Kaepernick is not married and he's made a lot of money and he can afford to do this. Your backup guard for the Bengals, can't necessarily go along with that.
So I have to challenge you, Steve, on one premise of the collusion piece. So essentially, the NFL knew that NFL colluded. The Redskins actually received a salary cap penalty after the owners colluded. I'd have to challenge you and ask you the question is. It seems as if you're insinuating that it's out of the realm of possibility that they could actually do that. When you look at the Baltimore Ravens sign a quarterback who's only taken 3 college snaps, as opposed to a guy who's gone to the Super Bowl. If I had $100, I'd bet 80 of it that it's collusion going on. Okay. But I do agree with your premise that you have to make the advertisers uncomfortable, but then that's such a big thing, right? So are you talking about boycotting merchandise? Are you talking about boycotting? Look at the Play 60 initiative. If you look at the Play 60 initiative, then are you talking about taking your kids out of NFL-sponsored high school football or neighborhood football? So it's really big, and the premise of my article was that you have to be focused and you have to be lasered, and it's like taking a shot at a Leviathan. Where do you even start?
Well, yeah. Let me address your first point about the collusion part first. Is it Occam's razor? Is that the principle that the simplest answer is usually the correct one? Is that what Occam's razor is? It's an Occam's razor thing. I think a lot of people are reading too much into this. The simple fact of the matter is that Colin Kaepernick, without a doubt, from a pure talent standpoint, is one of the 90 best quarterbacks in the world, right? I think nobody could reasonably debate that. But I don't think, if you look at his performance as a player, that he is good enough to be a starter. I think he's proven that. I think he has to be in a particular system in order to excel, and very few teams run that system. He's not a good pocket passer. He can't really run a West Coast offense. He has to be on the move, and he can't have a lot of reads. And that's when he's moving and he has kind of one read or go. That's where he succeeds. And that offense has kind of been shuttered out of the NFL with the failure of Robert Griffin and others. And so I think if you want to bring Colin Kaepernick in, nobody wants to bring a backup quarterback in who, number one, can't really run the system that the starter runs. They don't want to change stuff. They want to have a guy come in and be reasonably effective. And I'm not sure that's Kaepernick for the bulk of the teams. And so when you have that situation, you couple it with the fact that, right or wrong, his protest is irritated, for lack of a more concrete number, about half the country, okay? Half the country doesn't support him. Half the country does. I don't think any NFL team wants to bring that much controversy into their organization and irritate their customer base for a guy who isn't even going to start, and unless there's injuries, isn't even going to see the field. I think that's far more likely what has happened to him, rather than a bunch of owners getting on the field, getting on the phone and saying, ha, 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 we're not going to sign Colin Kaepernick. There's a few of those owners for sure. Like the owner of the Jets is now, he's in the Trump organization, as an ambassador to England, maybe? I can't remember. There's a handful of owners who won't sign him no matter what. Jerry Richardson, conservative guy. But I think the bulk of them just see this guy is a lightning rod. It's controversy. We don't need that. He's not that good anyway. And why do we need that for a backup quarterback? So I think that's what's going on with Kaepernick, and on the collusion aspect. And Rich is shaking his head. If we had video of it, he's shaking his head. So tell me where I'm wrong.
Chris, did you have anything you wanted to jump in?
Well, I think we go back to the question at hand. I think the idea of that a boycott has any kind of legs is silly for all the reasons that have already been outlaid. I totally agree with Rich. It's too big, right? It's not like you're targeting Campbell's soup or something that could be very fairly targeted and you can be coordinated. I mean, what do people gonna stop buying Ford trucks? These are big ticket items that advertise on NFL. It's very difficult to show a blip in a downward trend. So not a $1.25 can of soup. I don't know why I'm picking on Campbell. They're not even part of it. But small dollar items are much easier to organize a boycott on than a league the size of the NFL and the kind of advertisers and the kind of big ticket items. So it's just unrealistic that that's going to happen. What I find interesting, which also is probably another chilling effect on a boycott either happening, not let alone being effective, is you're actually starting to see the tide turn. Tonight, 11 Browns kneeled with 5 to 6 other players standing around them touching their shoulders. David Carr, just in his preseason game. Chris Long has been very vocal. A couple other guys. You're starting to see a trend. I actually think if people that are agitating on a boycott or have this issue, whether they think it's collusion or not, whatever, they actually don't even need to go to that level. You're actually starting to see, I don't know if it's the events of the last couple of weeks. I don't know if it's a result of the Trump administration. I don't know if it's just other players being emboldened. But you are not. This is not going to be one guy taking a knee for the rest of the year. You're going to see this become a trend by mid-season, perhaps, especially if current events start to roil. So it's just not an effective strategy to show your annoyance here, and it won't work. So I just think from political tactics, it's stupid.
These guys need to. I am who they're trying to convince. Okay. I mean, for those of you who don't, I don't disclose this on the hog side because it's not relevant, but I'm a political conservative here, and I was not offended by the source of the protest, the message behind the protest. If you have your cause and it's police violence, racial injustice, fine. What greatly offends people like me is when you do it in such a way that it appears as though you are disrespecting the flag, you're disrespecting the national anthem and everything it stands for. And I don't think you can just talk your way out of that. And that alone is what offends me and people like me. And that's what makes me and people like me say you need to find another way. If you found another way that didn't make me so infuriated, I would listen more.
No, you wouldn't.
No,
you wouldn't.
Yeah, yes, I would.
Not you personally, but because we've tried. We petition. We protest nonviolently. We try to say that this is the issue. And what Colin Kaepernick did was, while it could be perceived as disrespectful, it was nonviolent. And yet, you still don't listen. You still go to, you're disrespecting the country, and not very few people want to have a conversation about the actual issue. And I think to Chris's point, what people are seeing, where they're starting to change the tide, are the events that happened a couple of weeks ago in Charlottesville, where it's like, oh wow, now people are starting to hear what's been said. I think the point that you miss, Steve, is that you say, well, if you found another way, I'd listen. We've tried other ways, and people are getting caught up in the actual protest, but not the real issue. The real issue was excessive force against African Americans and people of color. And no matter how much we've tried to say it, it's either been, well, either the suspect, he had to have done something wrong. The police would not just gun him down. Or in certain situations, the facts of the case said that maybe it was justified. But people with the conservative views on the Colin Kaepernick situation are not listening to what, or have not wanted to hear what the issue is about. Just don't disrespect the flag and don't disrespect the anthem. Fine. Then let's have an honest dialogue about the real issue.
I'm willing and able to have.
And then the final point I wanted to make is that your statement on NFL owner collusion is contradictory to what the evidence has showed in history. You're talking about an NFL and Roger Goodell that destroyed tapes in the Spygate situation with the New England Patriots.
You're talking about the Patriots
Yes.
and the Jets thing.
You mean to tell me that if they could do that, they can't collude to keep a player out of the league? The
I
issue,
didn't say they couldn't
Steve,
do it.
is that
I'm saying
right.
Go ahead.
The issue.
Well,
is
I
this.
didn't say
The
they
issue
couldn't
is-
do it. I'm saying that I don't think they did in this case because it's pretty apparent to me what's happening.
So
That's my
so you bring
interrupt
Jay
you.
Cutler out of retirement. You bring in
He's a pocket quarterback.
Okay.
Jay Cutler's a pocket quarterback.
So
I think
go-
I
yeah.
think Kaepernick has a confluence of circumstances because I already said my views on his play, but you take the message, and then you see him wearing a Fidel Castro shirt, which enraged the Cuban community and a good bit of people like me. You're going to support Fidel Castro, who's a dictator and a communist, and then you didn't vote.
Right, that's a
you
major
came out and
issue
said
for me.
you didn't
You're right,
vote.
you're right.
It's a major issue for me.
Yes.
If you have this much of a problem with your country, you need to stand up and vote for who you think are the people who can support your views. And so you're going to support Fidel Castro and not vote, and then tell me that you don't like our country. I'm not down with that, and it's all of those things put together is why he's enraged so many people. You don't see people too mad at Michael Bennett and Chris Long. Right?
Right.
I mean, those people haven't enraged people like he has because they haven't gone that far. They've simply made their point and they move on. And that's not what Kaepernick's done.
I
think-
think the problem. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
A couple things. One, I think what's interesting, what's going to be different this year than last year, is the cognitive dissonance to be saying, so taking a knee during the anthem is inappropriate, but marching down the streets of an American college town with Nazi and KKK paraphernalia and AK-47s is appropriate public protest. So I think, what we conceive of as appropriate public protest has definitely got to ratchet it up, which makes taking a knee during the anthem sort of to Rich's point, whether it's violent, nonviolent, whatever. We've just, we've seen the most extreme version of accepted public protest, which is white guys with assault rifles.
Who's accepted those protests? Though those people are scum.
Well,
and,
you can think that, but they gave them a permit to march.
Well, I mean, there's a constitutional issue that goes into that.
All
too.
that's all true. I'm saying it's perception. So, you see the meme of Colin Kaepernick on the sideline on a knee, and you see white dudes with AK-47s in the middle of a college town. People are going to think aren't going to get as worked up about taking the knee. I'm just saying that those are the we didn't have that image last year to compare. And two, The collusion issue is an interesting one. I probably come down more on Rich's side on that one, although I think that they're in a cabal, back there, saying, are we going to do this? 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 I think that's probably not true, but I think there's collusion by type, which is what keeps him from getting signed, which is probably a milquetoast way to agree with both of you in the end. But I think so it's like you got to think about who these types are, and that it offended them and they don't want the controversy. I don't think it was a, telephone tree that said, let's not sign him.
Right.
Yeah, I think we could talk about this forever. I think we've frankly we've barely scratched the surface on this because it's such a complicated issue. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hope that, what people take from this is that, there are views on all sides of this issue, and there's not necessarily right or wrong, but I think what we most need, and what frankly the country needs, is peaceful dialogue and reasonable, responsible people talking about these issues in reasonable and responsible ways, as opposed to some of the things that we've seen happen recently.
And I think that in those reasonable and responsible ways is that nothing can be taken off the table. A lot of times we say, oh, well, no, it's not this, or no, I don't think it's that. When you have a dialogue with someone, the purpose of the dialogue is to listen and hear. The worst thing you can do to someone that has an issue is to tell them that either their issue is not valid, or the issue is not important, or say, well, it's not what you think it is. So, hopefully we can continue this. I think the actual events that happened in Charlottesville will actually have a positive effect because there's been a lot of dialogue already.
So we can all three, let's see if I can bring some consensus. We all three do agree that a fan boycott would be kind of silly, ineffective, and not the right tactic.
Correct. We agree.
Yes.
Consensus.
All right. Yes. Yes. Send us to Congress.
Yeah, right.
That's more than Congress has agreed to.
Right.
That's true.
Right. All right, so that just brings us to the end of another action-packed episode as we kind of focused on NFL issues. It's not what we do every show, but as football season rounds near, it's going to give us more and more storylines like this to find and tackle, so to speak. So we will head on out of here. Make sure you listen to the other shows on the network, including the Hog-Stye proper and the All 32. Is that what it's? My bad. Is that what it's still called now?
All 32. That is.
I
correct.
was right. See, I guessed myself and made myself sound like an idiot. So check out the other two shows on the network, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Great show.
Bye.